Meanwhile, as John just mentioned, Navy Secretary John Phelan was fired yesterday. The Wall Street Journal reports Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dismissed Phelan in a phone call just minutes before posting on social media, according to a person with knowledge of the discussions, and after Phelan had spent the day on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers about the Navy's budget requests. According to the paper, Pentagon officials told congressional aides Hegseth fired Phelan because he and Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg felt the Navy Secretary was not moving quickly enough on President Trump's shipbuilding priorities. The Journal reports Phelan's close relationship with President Trump was a cause of tension with Hegseth and Feinberg, and that Hegseth was upset when Phelan pitched the idea for a modern battleship directly to the president last fall, bypassing the defense secretary. Hung Cao, the Navy undersecretary, a former Senate candidate, is now serving as acting Navy secretary. The latest firing comes just 2 weeks after Hegseth ousted the Army's chief of staff, General Randy George. Hegseth has fired dozens of top generals, admirals, other defense leaders since taking office last year. So, David French, Mr. Phelan, first of all, was just a huge donor to President Trump's campaign in 2024 and was given this position because of that. But that to the side, it again appears to be Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's feelings that he was upset that Phelan had a close relationship with the president, had gone around him on some of the decisions, cost him his job here.
Yeah, what we're seeing is an enormous amount of instability now at the top of the military as Hegseth is going through and cleaning house, often firing generals with zero explanation, no real understanding, at least from the outside looking in, as to why this is happening. He's doing it during a time of war. So it's very clear you've got some sort of purge going on in the Pentagon. It is very far from clear that this purge is related at all to the underlying merits of the leadership of the generals and admirals and others who've been fired. This is a dangerous thing, really, creating this kind of instability, creating a perception that you've got a lot of ideological and just pure raw political infighting at the top of the Pentagon. This is where the Pentagon is the place where politics is supposed to be really, truly left at the edge, on the outside of the building, because these people are the warriors who are defending our country through administration after administration after administration. And I'm very worried that what this instability is going to do over the long term.
I'm curious, Jonathan Lemire, the president has now sort of broken this Second Amendment ban on getting rid of people. We just saw the third person in his cabinet fired. Pete Hegseth's name had been mentioned at the end of next year. They might be trying to move him along. What strikes me is Donald Trump has to know that Pete Hegseth has looked erratic at running the Pentagon, for God's sake. He's looked erratic. He's looked extraordinarily immature. He's looked paranoid. It's a very bad look for the administration. It's even a very bad look when Donald Trump is standing next to Pete Hegseth at press conferences. It diminishes if you have the President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief, and you have General Kane, and then you have this childlike, erratic, paranoid carnival barker in the middle of the two of these people. I mean, the Iranians have to take great comfort in seeing Pete Hegseth behind a microphone. So I'm just curious, have you heard any more talk about the administration moving this person along that's caused so much damage inside the Pentagon and who has not been liked by those close to the president from the very beginning, from the transition, because he lied continually to Susie Wiles and everybody else in the transition?
Yeah, a few things here. First of all, that point is exactly right. Susie Wiles and others in Trump's orbit have been deeply skeptical of Hegseth since the transition because he wasn't honest about some of the stuff in his background that then came out during public vetting. They thought that was a real own goal, if you will. in the first year of this second term, Trump did have that no scalps policy that they bandied about proudly, that there wasn't going to be the turnover like it was in his first term. That has now changed. We've had 3 cabinet members go. And there are rumors that more could follow. Those that I hear most of all who are on the thinnest ice include Tulsi Gabbard, include Kash Patel, and do include Pete Hegseth. But the Hegseth one always comes with a caveat that even Trump, who was, yes, very mindful of optics, of course, wouldn't want to fire his defense secretary during a war. Now, I think that when this conflict resolves itself, now, that's an open question as to when that will happen, that could be Hegseth's, sort of starts being steered towards the door. But Trump, I am told, still likes Hegseth in terms of his performance on TV. He likes those very combative news conferences that we have seen at the Pentagon a number of times now, including when he calls the press Pharisees a few days ago. And Hegseth he likes that. And Hegseth, but you're right.
He looks like, Hegseth looks like an idiot. For leaders across the world, they look at him as a joke. That weakens Donald Trump. Just like I was saying time and time again, that Kristi Noem would hurt Donald Trump's approval ratings on immigration. I said it repeatedly. You can go back and pull the tape. I said it repeatedly that if he kept Kristi Noem, she would hurt his numbers on immigration. And it has. Pete Hegseth, I'm saying it now, Pete Hegseth in that position is hurting Donald Trump on foreign policy issues, on this war, on the confidence that the Americans have in the commander-in-chief. I just don't understand. It's not hard to see that on TV.
Yeah, but job number one for a Trump cabinet official is to fight for the president on television. At least so far, Trump is okay with how Hegseth is doing this. But you're right about the culture of the Pentagon, too. I mean, not only I'm told by people who have been there for decades, it's a building now rife with paranoia, uncertainty, because there's been so many purges. Your top people, highly respected officers, have been pushed out. We've had now the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Navy head out. I mean, there is an extraordinary amount of uncertainty there at the worst possible time, Willie. Of course, as the DOD, is still trying to prosecute this war with Iran. So there are certainly Republicans, I am told, who would like to see Hegseth be shown the door, but I don't think that's imminent.